Hi everyone, this is the 50 States Highpointing podcast and YouTube channel. What started off as a project for a communications class has turned into something that I actually love doing. I have the privilege of providing the platform for people to talk about the extraordinary things they do in the outdoors. Highpointing is the challenge of reaching the highest elevation in each of the 50 states. Highpointers don't get paid for their hobby, no one is sponsored by an outdoor company, and people fit this challenge into their everyday lives that also include careers and family. I found through these interviews that people who attempt this challenge are incredible and genuinely enjoy talking about their experiences. If you consider yourself a highpointer and you want to share your story on this podcast or interview, please send me an email at 50stateshighpointingpodcast@gmail.com. It has been a pleasure speaking with every highpointer. I hope you enjoy. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 50 States Highpointing podcast. I'm your host, Lauren, and the highpointer that we're speaking with today is Jack from Texas. Jack, welcome to the show.
Hey.
So can you tell our listeners a little bit about how you got started in the outdoors and what got you highpointing?
Well, I don't actually know the answer to that, to be honest. The best I could figure is maybe like 5-6 years ago, I was sort of laying out plans to visit every state. And initially it was just going to be every capital. And at some point in there, I found Highpoints, and I'm like, oh, that'd be a cool thing to add on. So I think my first big trip was Arkansas. So we went up to Magazine Mountain during that. Then I did another trip to Florida, and we did Britton Hill, which is good. And then just a few weeks ago, I went up to Kansas and Oklahoma.
Mount Sunflower?
Yeah, it was nice. It was cold up there, but
we
saw the last remnants of the snow for the year.
Okay. So what made you want to get out and see every state?
I don't know. I think it's comes from being a gamer, and I kind of have the 100% and the collectible attitude, and it's
okay, yeah.
It's a fun way to force yourself to see parts of the country you wouldn't see otherwise.
Of course. Mm-hmm.
I also did doing all the counties in Texas. So.
Oh, that's fun. So apart from highpointing, are there any other endeavors that you like to do while you're traveling to each state?
Oh, well, there's capitals, Texas county courthouses. I'm also a train guy, as you can see by the shirt.
Okay.
I'm going to try and ride every passenger train in America, so it's another challenge. Yeah.
So does that mean like passenger train in each city? Amtrak
like
train?
every like streetcar, metro system, an Amtrak line.
Wow.
I'm not going to do the Heritage Rail stuff, though. That's a little too much.
Okay. I have ridden the Lakeshore Limited Amtrak line from Chicago to Rochester, New York.
But is it a good view of the lake that?
I can't say because I fell asleep. It was an overnight trip. And I've done it a couple times, and every time I just fell asleep.
Yeah. I know I heard some complaints about Utah because the Amtrak line goes through Utah in the night. And it's like, well, it'd be really nice to see Utah from the train, but you can't because it's black night and it never runs in the daylight. So
out of the high points that you've done and the high points that you've attempted, which one is your favorite?
It's got to be Magazine.
Yeah.
Just the Ozarks is a fun place. I'm a car guy as well, so we went up there primarily as a driving thing, just to drive all the mountain roads. And Arkansas is a perfect state for that because it doesn't really get that many tourists, so the roads are pretty quiet. And it's got good mountains. The altitude's not too high, so you don't have the issues you have in like Colorado with less power and stuff like that. So that was one of my favorite trips. And we obviously we were in the Ozarks, so why not do Magazine while you're up there?
Have you had any high point attempts that didn't go very well?
Well, I mean, Oklahoma is the one that didn't go great. Because we'd done Sunflower the night before.
Okay.
Like we just barely did Sunflower before the sun went down, and then we cut through Colorado. And what I didn't know when I planned the trip is that if you go straight from Sunflower to Black Mesa, you end up doing like 100 miles of dirt roads, which
I've heard
was a
that.
surprise.
People have said that on the show.
So we ended up doing that, and then at some point we got a nail in the tire because when we got up in the morning,
Oh.
the the air pressure light had come on, so we were filling the
Mm.
tire up, and so that's in the back of my mind the whole time I'm hiking, is that we're going to have to go and get the tire fixed later. So that was like an impending problem, and then the day had already been stretched because I tried to squeeze Black Mesa into a day that was already pretty packed.
Sure.
Largely actually because I was listening to your podcast and someone was talking about Black Mesa. I'm like, well, I'm going to be near Black Mesa. I guess I could give it a go, but
Oh,
turned out not
cool.
to be enough time because I made it to
Oh,
we got about 2 miles in and I'm feeling really tired already. It's going to be a long day no matter what we do. So I just
hmm.
threw in the towel and started walking back. So I was a little
Well,
disappointed about that.
yeah, sure. But it'll still be there whenever
Yeah.
you want to attempt it again. And so, how far is that from where you are in Texas?
From Central Texas, that's like 10-hour drive. I know Driscoll is the closest to here, which is funny. A majority of Texans, Driscoll is actually closer than Guadalupe, I think, because everyone lives in
Yeah,
East
yeah,
Texas is way more populated than West Texas. So it's kind of funny that.
that's right. Yeah, Guadalupe is pretty remote. So, do you have any plans on doing that one?
I think I'm gonna have to build up to it. I have actually been. I went to Guadalupe National. What is it? Mountains National Park, and we did
Yes.
Carlsbad and all
Mhm.
that last year.
Oh, cool. Cool.
But I didn't really feel up to doing that hike yet. I think I'm gonna have to do it as
Sure.
like a full camping trip because you could camp like 2/3 of the way up.
Oh,
Um,
perfect.
yeah,
That's cool.
but the
Yeah.
saddest thing about that is we went there. Um, we get to Guadalupe Mountains National Park. We go set up the tent and get everything set up, and then we're like, okay, let's go down to the viewpoint where you can see Guadalupe Peak. And we go down there, and it's you can't write this, but like we pull up in the car. I get out, and my friend sees it before I do. And he's like, "You're going to be disappointed." I turn around, and there's just a cloud covering the whole thing. And so I haven't even seen it, even though I've been there.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, some people get to a high point and they can't see anything because
Yeah,
they're in a cloud.
I
So,
guess so.
so are there any challenges that you encounter throughout your travels or your high pointing endeavor?
I mean, for me, it's tough because I have um, Becker's muscular dystrophy, which essentially means that I don't build muscle mass like a normal
Okay.
person would. So I kind of have the stamina that I have is what I have, and if I
Okay.
push myself too hard, I can do like permanent damage. So it makes
Okay.
I guess you have to be a little more strategic,
Sure.
which
Hmm.
is a lot of what happened in Oklahoma. Is I was like I probably could make it the full 8 miles, but it's going to take me 6 hours or whatever by the time I actually finish it because I had to do it
Wow.
slowly. But and then I also have celiacs, which is like a severe gluten allergy, essentially. And
Hmm.
I only found out about this a couple years ago. So once I stopped eating gluten, I'm so much healthier now, and that's
Oh,
really helped
good.
me get a lot more distance out of my walking. Because I I would never have attempted Black Mesa before,
Hmm.
but I've been able to do walks about 8 miles before. So
Wow.
yeah,
So even though you didn't, get on the summit of Black Mesa, it sounds like the attempt was still rewarding in the sense that you showed yourself that you could do a significant walk. You just didn't have enough time.
yeah.
So, what made you want to start high pointing knowing that you have this challenge of muscular dystrophy?
Stubbornness.
Okay.
I I knew I wouldn't be able to do it, so I've been trying to. I've like my first plan was I'll do 25 low points and 25 high points, and it adds up to 50.
Okay.
But then when you look into low pointing, you kind of find out that you need a boat for like half of them because they're just most of them are rivers. So it's just and the
Sure.
coastal ones are kind of boring because it's just like, well, you just go to a beach in that
Yeah.
state. Like I've done Texas. I've been to a beach in Texas. I've been to a beach in Florida. Uh,
Yeah.
but it becomes less interesting for most of them. Uh,
I
but
didn't think you had to get into a boat. So, like, I'm at the state low point in Arizona on the Colorado River, but I've been to the river. I haven't gotten in it. So, does that mean I haven't been to the state low point?
well, I see the way I define it is you have to go to where the river leaves the state because the rivers go
Oh,
down gradually.
yeah.
That's why it's
Okay.
the low point. So to get to that specific point, you kind of need a boat.
Oh, that's interesting. So, can you talk about some of the preparation physically and mentally that you have to do, either for high pointing or any other physical endeavor with your condition?
Um, yeah, I think it's mostly just I got to kind of do a warm up. Um,
Hmm.
and I had done a few things before Black Mesa. I'd done what was it, a 7 mile hike, and I did a pretty rough, I think it was 4 mile round trip hike, which was actually a city high point. Um,
Oh, which one?
a city, it's a small city outside of Austin called Lakeway,
Okay.
and they call it Mount Lakeway, but it's a pretty rough hike because you have to go over hills. So I think you have to go over three
Okay.
hills. So you have to go up and then down and then up and then down. And then the trail
Yeah.
is very badly marked. So you can easily end up on the track that basically follows power lines. And that
Oh.
is very steep. So if you stray off the trail, you end up with a shorter distance but a harder hike. And I didn't really
Hmm.
wear the right shoes, so it came pretty tricky. But I have since bought
Yeah.
proper hiking boots and hiking poles, so
That
far
makes
better
such a
prepared.
difference, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me, a lot of the fun is planning the trips. So doing it
Yeah.
just feels like, all right, we've done that, take that off, take that off. And I was saying that my last road trip. It's like I was I was looking forward to the whole time going home, and I have this map where I've been tracking every county I've been to in America,
Mm.
and every city I've been to in Texas. So it's like I was really excited about doing that
Wow.
when I got back.
Can you talk about some of your most memorable moments? State high pointing, county high pointing, low pointing, riding trains, and all the things you do.
Well, I'd say Wales was pretty memorable because yeah, it's like New Hampshire in that you can take a cog railway up to the top. So
Okay.
me and my mom went up in the little rail car, and I think it took like an hour and a half to get all the way up. And
Wow.
my dad and my brother and my sister all hiked up. I don't remember what the hike distance is. I imagine it's like probably about 8 miles, something like that. But then you get to the top, and there's people everywhere. Like
Really?
it's like being in like Grand Central Station or something. There's like a cafe and everything, and then the with the train, it's like you get half an hour, and then you have to be back on the train to go back down. So
Oh, okay.
it's memorable in that it was actually kind of disappointing because it's just sort of like run to the summit, take a picture, run back down again. Um,
Yeah.
but I think that's my first one, so I think that is
Oh,
inherently
Wales was
memorable.
your first high point?
Yeah, it must have been. Don't think we did
Wow.
any
Okay.
before that.
So when you were traveling to Wales with your family, did you say, let's reach the highest point in this country? Or was it
Um,
already on the itinerary?
well, yeah, it's a pretty well known tourist location in Wales, and we
Okay.
my parents are both from the UK, so we used to spend
Okay.
every summer there when I was a kid. And a couple summers we went and we rented a cottage out in Wales, and Snowdon was just on the agenda one year. I think
Hmm.
my dad and my brother wanted to hike it, and they're not really they don't. not high pointers in that they're like taking them off. They're both hike, but they're not trying
Sure.
to do all 50 or anything. But I did do Hampshire once, because my parents are both from Hampshire. So I
Okay, now
looked it
where
up
in
when I
England
was
is
there.
Hampshire?
So it's southwest of London.
Okay.
It's close enough that most people in Hampshire commute to London, or at least live next to someone who commutes to London.
Okay. Hmm.
But the high point is it's just a nice green hill,
Hmm.
and especially in summer, England is very nice and green, and it's got the rolling hills. So even though it's
Yeah.
not a very high point, it still has a really nice view. And I think that there used to be a fort there, so there's sort of like the ruins of the fort, like just the
Oh,
outline of it.
interesting.
So yeah, it was pretty nice
Wow.
for a county high point.
What are your next high points that you have planned?
Well, I got my eyes on Tom Sock and Driscoll.
Hmm.
I'm sort of planning to go on a sort of driving trip. We're going to go through Louisiana and then up around Arkansas and then um, around like southern Missouri and then up to Tom Sock and then back down again.
Oh, cool. Are you going to do some of the county high points or low points along the way?
Yeah, I'll fit some county high points in um,
Yeah.
because I think I passed 150 Texas counties of 254. So I'm
Wow.
like, every time I do a
Wow.
road trip, I try to get a couple done at least.
So when you're doing these county high points and state high points, do you see other high pointers along the way on the trails or something?
Um, I, I think we saw some in Oklahoma.
Okay.
Um, because you can tell when they're like their plates are from like 3 states away. You're like, yeah, they're probably not just here randomly. They just came to Oklahoma to hike
Sure.
Black Mesa, unless they're actually
Yeah,
a high
yeah.
pointer. County high pointing is you quickly realize that it's not as much fun as you think it is because most of them are on private land. So it's just kind of like
Oh, sure.
attempt it. Oh no, can't do it. Attempt. Oh, can't do it. So
Okay.
that's why I've only done one. It's
Okay.
just
Yeah.
sort of like get as close as you can, but it's not really the same.
Yeah. Well, and some of the state high points are on private land as well. And that's, you just have
Yeah,
to see when they open it up to the public.
but there's few enough of them, and there's enough people that try to organize with those landowners to make sure that at
Yes.
least at some point in the year people can do it.
You're right. That's true.
I've had more
So,
luck with city high points, I think.
okay. So which city high points have you done?
So I've done Austin, which is really disappointing because it's just an intersection.
Is it
Um,
really?
yeah, a lot of people claim it's what's it called? Mount Bonnell, but it's Mount Bonnell is actually not the highest point. It's just the most prominent point in Austin, and it
Oh, okay.
it does have a much better view than the real high point, but it's
Hmm.
not technically the high point. Then I did Sunset Valley, which is a suburb of Austin. Westlake
Okay.
Hills, another suburb of Austin. Pflugerville, also a suburb of Austin. Lakeway, like I said.
Yeah.
And San Antonio. San Antonio actually has a nice one. It's in a park, and I think you can see downtown from it,
No.
just barely.
So is there a
What else?
community of county high pointers in Texas?
Um, Not that I know of. I think it's usually I just go on Peak Bagger
Oh,
and
right. Yeah.
look at trip reports and stuff.
Yeah.
But
We had someone on the show who's trying to do all of the California county high points,
yeah,
and he found some kind of register where someone's keeping track of who's done them and when they completed them and everything. I bet there's something out there of
yeah.
someone keeping track of this.
I think there is a website where you can track it, but because there are some people who go hardcore and they'll actually go and talk to people and they'll actually go out and try and find the landowner. But I don't like talking to people enough to do that. So
So back to state high pointing. Do you plan on doing all 50, or do you just want to see as many states as you can and reach the high points if you can?
I'm trying to do, I think 40 because I know I
Okay.
can't do at least the top five, but I feel like 40 I can do. Could maybe
Hmm.
push past that. I'd really like to do Texas because it's my home state.
Of course.
Um,
Yeah.
but I know I can't do. I don't. I'm never going to do Rainier or Whitney or any of the big ones. So
Well, those can be multi-day trips, you know.
yeah,
You can it doesn't people rarely go up and down Rainier in a day. Um, make it into 3 days.
yeah. Well, I'll see what happens after I get to 40. I think.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. The more I talk to state high pointers, the more I realize that they do these other high points along the way. Like there's a lot of people who either try to see all the national parks, or when they're in the national park, they want to find the high point in that park. I've talked to people who do counties, cities, they do low points. It's like there's just something about us where we're just like, okay, where am I? Okay, what's the highest point? How do I get there?
Yeah. Um,
I don't know
yeah.
what
No,
it is.
actually, I was listening to I forgot what his name is. The guy who was talking about high pointing national parks, and it kind of
Yes,
sparked
that
something.
was Michael. Hmm.
Michael, yeah. And I was like, well, maybe I should try doing like local parks. So I'm gonna have a go at doing my
Okay,
city
yeah.
parks. We tried one, um, but the high point was like buried in some bushes, and I was like, yeah, I think I'm close enough. I don't really need to go
Right.
bushwhacking. Um,
Well, it's fun when the national park is not known for its high point to find its high point. So,
yeah,
Guadalupe Mountains, for example, that national park is known for the high point of Guadalupe Mountain. Mount Rainier, that's another
yeah.
obvious high point.
Although,
Denali.
but Carlsbad, right next to Guadalupe Mountains. Nobody high points Carlsbad.
Exactly.
Uh,
Yeah, exactly. And so I think Michael was talking about Carlsbad and high pointing that one, or it was another national park in the desert. Um, but those are fun to find those high points. Like I was in the Channel Islands National Park in California, and finding where the high point was on the island that we were was just fun because it took us kind of on a trail that we wouldn't have gone on if we weren't searching for a high point, and it was super fun.
yeah. I think the best part about the parks is they're public land, so you know you can most likely get there.
That's another thing.
Yeah, so it's always
Yeah,
attainable. And I was
you're
really
right.
happy.
You're right.
I looked into Texas State high points, and they're actually really easy to find because by default, the Texas Parks Department gives you a topographical map with the peaks on it, so you can
Oh,
see where the high
perfect.
point is. You just have to go, oh, it's that one. Okay, so I'm gonna give that
Oh,
a go at
good.
some point. I know some of the
That's
state
cool.
parks are hard, especially as you go further west, but
Sure.
the ones more central are easier.
Yeah, yeah. So, what are the benefits that you've experienced throughout high pointing?
Um, I mean, it's good exercise. Gets
Of
you out.
course.
It gets you out in nature, which I don't know if I would do that much if I didn't high point. Um,
Yeah.
I'm more of a city person, really, but
Okay.
the high points are a
Hmm.
nice break from the city. Uh,
Yeah, they're
I
very remote often.
yeah, I know we did that the week trip went through Kansas and Oklahoma and North Texas, and you just get used to, especially in Texas, everywhere. As soon as you get out of the town, you just start doing 75 because the speed limit is 75 in most of Texas. And then we had to
Hmm.
drive through Dallas at rush hour, and I was like, oh, I hate traffic so much.
Yeah, I drove through the Texas Panhandle when I was on my way to Taos, New Mexico to do Wheeler Peak. And I was surprised at how fast people were driving and also how remote it is out there. You drive through these little towns to fill up on gas, and I'm just like, where is everybody? And what do they do out here?
Yeah. Now, what was crazy was
It's
to me being up in Colorado, they have these big gates and they can just close them and it's basically like it's snowing. It's not safe to leave town. They just close the roads and lock
yeah,
everybody in town because they don't want to have to rescue people. Um,
yeah, right.
and and you see, and the same thing across Kansas, the interstate can just be closed. If the snow gets bad enough, they'll just shut down the whole interstate, which to
Wow.
well, I mean, in Texas, I mean, I guess I should be familiar with that because it snows a little bit here and everything grinds to a halt because
Hmm.
we can't handle it down here with snow.
Sure. Yeah.
But as an alternative to high points, I started doing the highest roads in states, which
Oh, interesting.
is a different adventure. So I've done Texas, which is near Big Bend. It's the
Okay.
road up to the McDonald Observatory, and
Hmm.
you get a really good view if you go up there. It's definitely something
Interesting.
worth doing if you're in that area.
Okay, so where is the highest road in New Mexico?
I forget what it's called, but it's up above Albuquerque, and you have to go
Okay.
around the back side from Albuquerque. I think you can take a gondola up from the Albuquerque side, but we came up and it was
Interesting.
the first thing we were doing that day. We got up early, like so we got there just as the sun was rising, and we had this nice twisty road all to ourselves going up. Um, and then you get
Wow.
this great view of the whole, like basically the whole metro area of Albuquerque. You can
Yeah.
see from this mountain, and then
Wow.
yeah,
I've driven through Albuquerque and I stayed there too. And I remember I drove through during the night and I just remember kind of coming around a mountain and then Albuquerque was right there. So
yeah,
was it on the other side of that on the interstate? I mean,
yeah. It's like
I know that the highest road wasn't the interstate, but is am I thinking of the right area?
the north, whatever that interstate is, it runs like through two mountains, and one of those
Yeah,
mountains, if you go up behind it, there's like a twisty road that takes you all the way to the top.
that's cool.
Yeah,
Wow.
but
So I didn't know high roading was a thing either.
yeah, no, I did find a list. Someone had made a list online that I found. So
So, what would you tell other people who are considering high pointing or just want to get out and discover something, whether it's a list to check off, peaks to bag, or low points to reach, what would you tell them?
I just find something that even if it doesn't seem attainable, like I've done things, I've made lists of things to do, and I'm like, this is never going to happen. I mean, I thought riding every passenger train was a crazy idea, and then it's you just sort of you warm up to it, and you warm up to it's like, well, maybe I could do it if if I space it out for like 40 years, maybe I could do it. And the great thing about
Yeah.
that is I'm not worried about even if I'm in a wheelchair, I could still do that. They're all most of them are wheelchair accessible, so. Uh,
Yeah.
but,
Wow.
but yeah, I'd say start with easy stuff,
Hmm.
or even start on a smaller scale, and just
Hmm.
it's very satisfying.
Do you consume any high pointing or outdoor adventure media or books or documentaries?
Uh, yeah, a few. I really like there's two YouTube channels, Rooftops of America,
Okay.
and
Hmm.
I think his channel's just called Garrett Shaw.
Hmm.
Um, they're both very good. They're both trying to do all of the high points. And I think Garrett Shaw is
Okay.
trying to do all the seven summits as well. And he does kind of like artistic videos, like with drone shots and stuff. And
Hmm.
then Rooftops of America, I like to think of as more of like a PBS documentary.
Yes.
Because he'll
Yeah,
actually
you're right.
he actually goes in, he does like the history of the area. Um,
Hmm.
and then like even only like half the video is even the high point because he's done all this extra research on the history of the area and all this stuff, and
Yeah.
it's interesting. And I like that he's doing the territories as well. Um, I feel
Okay.
like they get
Okay.
forgotten a lot.
You're right, they do. Because I've
Yeah.
never spoken about that on this podcast, and I don't even think I've ever considered it.
Yeah. It's just, I guess people just don't want to pay the airfare because it can get pretty expensive to fly to Guam or whatever.
Yeah, right.
Becomes a very expensive holiday when you're paying $2,000 for a plane ticket. Um,
Well, some of those are national parks. American Samoa is a national park.
yeah.
Virgin Islands, I think, are a national park. So that's another set of high points right there.
Yeah. But one of them is like there's not even a trail. It's how few people do it. You just have to
Oh,
bushwhack your
okay.
way up it. I think it's the Northern
Okay.
Mariana Islands, if I remember right.
Wow,
It's
that's
just
that's dedication.
yeah. Um, but I'm also a big fan of Jack Bennett's book about the Canadian high points. Not one in a day. I wouldn't.
What's it called?
Not one in a day.
Okay.
It's
I've
about
never heard of
doing
that.
the 10 uh, provincial high points in Canada and the three territorial ones. And
That is interesting.
yeah, and even though there's a lot less of them, a lot less people have done them. I think only like 3 or 4 people have ever completed all 13 because some of them are
Wow.
just so remote that
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I
it's
mean,
like I'm sure Mount Logan is one of them, and I know that that's out there.
yeah. I
And they
mean, it's like
also
doing
require like technical skill too, right?
yeah. I think some of them are like full rock climbing, but it's
Yeah.
like doing Alaska 3 more times.
Right.
Because it seems like most of the people who did it, they're like, well, I finished all 50 American high points, so what can I do next?
Okay.
And you're like, well,
Okay.
there's Canada up there. Let's do that.
Wow. Some people that I ask on the show who have done the 50 high points, I say, like, what's next? And I think they're just satisfied with having accomplished 50 state high points.
Yeah.
And, some of them, their goal is to pass it to the next generation, high pointing. But then there are people that are like, okay, now it's time to conquer the world. I've done the United States.
Yeah.
Let's move on. That's interesting.
It does disappoint me that I have never found anything about people trying to high point the Australian states, which I find surprising. I mean, I get that
Okay.
they're very remote, but you'd think there'd be some Australians dedicated to trying it. I mean, there's only like 6 or 7 of them, but
And they're not that high.
yeah, they're just really far from any roads.
Oh, okay. Well,
I
yeah,
think
I
that's the
feel
main
like,
issue.
there's a podcast that I listen to. It's called the Adventure Sports Podcast. And the host has so many interesting people on that do all of these wild adventures that make you think, okay, what's next? Like, what what is someone going to do now? Because it seems like everything's already been done. And then you hear of some adventure that's like, oh, okay, I guess, yeah, you're the first one to do that. And, maybe this Australian state high points is, the next frontier in high pointing.
Yeah.
So, what are some other peak bagging, low pointing endeavors that you do that maybe we've never heard of?
Well, I started trying to do what I call low to high pointing, where you have to start in the
Hmm.
lowest point and make your way to the highest point. And
Okay.
the idea was to have different categories. So you could do like, um, you can use a bicycle, or one where you can use a car, one where you just walk.
Wow.
Um, and I did a couple cities. Um, we did Sunset Valley by car, and we did Pflugerville as well by car.
So the idea then is to do it in one trip. So it's not like, during the summer, I'm going to hit a low point and then I'll go back to that state in the spring and I'll do a high point. You have to complete it in one round. Is
Yeah,
that the goal?
essentially.
Okay.
Um, and from what I found, I've only seen people do. You can find people who've done Hawaii and who've done California, and
Yes. Yeah.
I think they're uniquely suited to it because people are like with Hawaii, they're like, oh, well, I can go from the ocean to the highest point, and it's if you do it by cycling, it's a decent, it's a day, but
Hmm.
it's perfectly attainable if you're happy to cycle uphill all day, which I'm not sure I would be, but
I've heard of people doing that in California, and they will ride a bike from Badwater Basin and Death Valley National Park to Lone Pine, get off the bike, climb up Mount Whitney. In fact, when I was out there in Lone Pine, I did visit Death Valley National Park, and I remember seeing people riding their bike towards Lone Pine on our way back.
Yeah.
But that is a popular one. It's also somewhat close, considering how big the state of
Yeah, they're
California
very
is.
conveniently located.
Yes. Yeah, you're right. Hmm.
You'd think
This,
someone in Delaware would do it because it's easy in Delaware. It's not that far from the coast to the high point.
yeah, I didn't consider that. Now, where I am in Arizona, that is literally from one end of the state to the other. And so
Where
I'm
is
in
the Arizona
Yuma.
high point?
The Arizona High Point is in Flagstaff, Mount Humphreys.
This
So you would have to
is
drive from Yuma to Flagstaff, and that's about 7 hours.
yeah,
And then
that's
you'd
a
have to
long walk.
climb Mount Humphreys. But that is a really interesting goal. And I would not be surprised if someone out there is just trying to check that off as we
Yeah.
speak.
I mean, same thing in Texas. It's uh from I think the closest point, the fastest journey you can do is from Corpus Christi to Guadalupe Peak, and that's like a 6, 7 hour drive. So
Wow.
yeah. Maybe if you spent a
Wow.
week cycling, you could do it, but you got to be a little crazy to
Well,
do that.
it's like there are less and less records to be set. And so this is like, again, like with the Australian high points, I think this is another high point, low point record that it's like one of the last ones out there. Someone's going to do it.
Yeah. So basically, the high pointer, he designed this scale of what percent of the total effort of doing all 50 high points each high point is. Um,
Okay. And now is this a measure of physical exertion?
yeah, essentially. Um,
Okay. Wow.
and it became very useful to me because I now have all of
Oh,
the high points
yeah.
ranked by difficulty, and I can sort of
Yeah.
gauge uh, how difficult each one is and which ones I can expect to do.
That is really interesting. I would also like to share that
Yeah,
with
I'll give you a
with
link. It
listeners
was
and viewers.
made by H. Walter Vanderhyde. I think he also wrote a book about doing all 50 high points,
Okay.
but it is extremely useful.
Wow. So what is the unit of measurement he uses?
Well, he kind of came up with a formula for it,
Okay.
partially based on distance, and then with what is it? I think it's like multipliers based on like if you have to do rock climbing, how
Mm-hmm.
steep the terrain is, stuff like that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it is funny how like half of them are barely anything, and then Denali is 22% of the total effort.
Wow. So the effort measurement then is physical exertion, difficulty of the peak, and what other factors does he use to come up with this formula?
The equation is mileage plus
Okay.
elevation gain,
Yeah.
uh, difficulty of the terrain, how many days it takes, and then like extra points if it's extreme temperatures.
Okay.
So
Wow. So you're right then. That is a really good tool to have when you're planning. And I would say, especially when you're doing high points under challenging conditions, that's a really good tool to have.
yeah, and if you're not sure you can do all of them, you can kind of gauge. Well, maybe I can do
Yeah.
this many of them, and I kind of
Yeah.
uh, I have them split into difficulties. This is from like this, the easy ones, which is like half of them are just no problem for anybody,
Hmm.
and then
Yeah.
a couple that are just a short walk, and then a longer walk, and then the I have six that I'm not sure if I can do, but I'm going to attempt, and then
Which ones are those?
Okay. Guadalupe Peak, Humphreys Peak, Mount Angrion in northern Mariana Islands, Boundary Peak,
Hmm.
and Mount Elbert.
Wow. Well, that's really interesting. Again, I keep learning from you all these different things, and again, you'll have to share that website because that is a very useful tool, and I'm sure a lot of listeners who don't already know about it and use it would appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a lot of fun, and I learned so much from having you on here, from all these different endeavors, nationally, internationally, and these tools. And I'd like to share your Instagram with the listeners and this website too with everyone. And really appreciate you coming on here and sharing your story. And it's very inspiring what you do, considering the challenges that you face. That is really, really awesome. And I know that someone listening out here will hear that and get up and maybe decide to go to their local park and reach the high point. And who knows where that can go from there.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for being on the show. This has been fun.
Yeah. No problem.